I'm Julie, and today on the Taste of Lizzy T show, I'm going to be showing you how to make our most popular recipe, homemade cinnamon rolls with a secret ingredient. This recipe is our most made and most reviewed recipe on the website. It has 4.97 out of 5 stars. These cinnamon rolls are soft, they're gooey, they have a cream cheese glaze, they're very similar to the ever popular CINNABON cinnamon rolls, and I'm gonna show you how to get that perfectly gooey texture. Let's get started. Now there's several different ways to mix up bread dough. We like to use a power mixer. If you have a stand mixer or a Bosch mixer like this, they work great. If you have a bread machine, you can use the dough setting on that bread machine and it's basically hands off, or you can do the traditional route and just use a bowl and a spoon and knead by hand. You do not have to have a mixer to do this. We just find it easiest, so we use a mixer. So let's start adding the ingredients right to the bowl of the mixer. The first thing that goes in is 1 cup of warm milk. You want this milk to be about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll want to test it with a thermometer to make sure it's not too hot. If it's too hot, it will kill the yeast. We use an instant yeast. You want to read the instructions on the back of your yeast packet. Sometimes you add the yeast right in with the flour and then add the milk, and in that case, the temperature needs to be just a little bit warmer, and other times you sprinkle it right over the warm milk. So follow the instructions on the back of your baking yeast, and you should have no problems if you check the temperature. I'm gonna sprinkle the yeast right on top of the milk, and then because this is an instant yeast, I don't leave time for it to proof. It will all come together beautifully. I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of butter. You want this to be very soft at room temperature. 1/2 a cup of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and then 2 room temperature eggs. The last thing you add in is the flour. The recipe calls for 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I will take a cup, and I have a smaller cup here, scoop the flour into the measuring cup, and then take a knife and just slice it across the top so that all of that extra flour falls back in. That is the correct way to measure flour. Add that in, 4.5 cups of flour. And then I will set this mixer to just start mixing. The key to a soft dough for these cinnamon rolls is to make sure that you don't add too much flour, which is why it's important to accurately measure the flour. This is especially important if you're kneading by hand. The dough is going to be sticky and you will be tempted to add more flour. The key is to have the dough slightly tacky. You don't want the dough to be dry. As the mixer mixes, the dough will start to come together and it will get rid of that lumpy appearance and start looking very smooth. This will take about 7 to 10 minutes of kneading. It is still slightly tacky, but it's soft and stretchy, and that's how you know it's ready. Remove the attachment from your stand mixers and pull out the dough. Just kind of form it into a nice ball. Again, it should be slightly tacky, not too dry, slightly stick to your hands, but not end up with dough all over them. The next step is to let the dough rise. So get yourself a big glass bowl, spray it with some cooking spray so that the dough doesn't stick, and place your dough ball right inside, cover it up, and place it in a warm spot. The exact time it takes to rise will really depend on temperature inside your house. Many different things can affect bread dough, but you'll want to just let it rise until it is about double. While the dough is rising, you can prepare the cinnamon roll filling. I have 1 stick of butter here that's very, very soft, almost melted. Into it, I'll add 1 cup of brown sugar and 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. Just use a spatula and mix those up. And then once the cinnamon roll filling is mixed, you can just set it aside until you're ready to spread it on the dough. This dough has been rising for about 45 minutes, and as you can see, it has definitely doubled in size. When I work with bread doughs and pastries, I like to use a pastry mat. It just helps with the cleanup. So I have a pastry mat laid down, sprinkle it with some flour so the bread dough doesn't stick. And then we'll turn out the dough right onto the mat. Sprinkle the top of the bread dough with a little bit more flour to make it easy to roll out. Take a rolling pin. The dough should be really soft and easy to work with. Roll a large rectangle. We like to make about 12 rolls. You can roll your bread dough larger and thinner if you would like more than 12 rolls. But we find that cutting them into about 12 slices just gives everybody a nice big sweet roll. This rectangle is about 24 inches long and 14 to 15 inches wide. This is traditionally how we roll the dough. If you roll your dough thinner and make this part longer, then you'll be able to roll it up tighter and have more cinnamon swirls inside. You can really just roll it however you'd like, but about 24 by 15 is our typical size. Take the cinnamon filling and go ahead and spread that on. It's gonna seem sometimes like it's not sticking. Just do your best to get it on there. If we're in a hurry, sometimes we'll just spread butter on the dough and then sprinkle brown sugar and cinnamon on top. That works just as well. You can also totally melt the butter, but we find sometimes when you roll that up, the butter runs out. There's many different ways to do it. As long as you get that butter and cinnamon and sugar in there, your cinnamon rolls will be delicious. Once the cinnamon roll filling is as even as possible on the dough, we roll up the cinnamon rolls jelly roll style. Start at one end, just roll towards the other end, keeping it as tight as possible. I kind of stretch it a little bit as I roll to make the cinnamon rolls nice and tight. After it's totally rolled up, I sometimes stretch the roll just to try to make it as even as possible. Sometimes the middle will end up a little bit thicker and you can just kind of stretch it out. Now, as you can see, the end of the rolls aren't quite as even as the middle. So if you want your cinnamon rolls to be perfect all the way across the pan, go ahead and chop off the ends of those cinnamon rolls. Don't throw them away. Secret, put them in a little dish and bake them, and then you can enjoy a small little cinnamon roll for yourself. So we're gonna do that to both sides and set those ends aside. And then from there, you can make as many slices as you would like. As I said before, we make 12 slices. Make them as even as possible. So I sometimes stamp out a little cut to make sure that I am getting them even. And that's about correct, so I'll go ahead and make the cuts. I'm using a dough cutter, and it has a sharp edge and just makes a nice clean cut in the dough. We bake the cinnamon rolls in a 9 by 13 pan. Spray the pan with cooking spray, and then we'll just take each roll and set it cinnamon side up into the pan. You can reshape them a little bit to circles. As you can see, this one is a little bit wider than the other one, so it will definitely poof up higher as it bakes. At this point, it's time to let the rolls do a second rise. So I have a cloth I'm gonna cover, and again, put them in a warm place. This will take maybe a little bit less time, probably 25 to 30 minutes. So the rolls should rise up to about double of what they were. And as you can see, those beautiful swirls. And then it's time for the secret ingredient. The secret to gooey cinnamon rolls is to use half of a cup of heavy cream and pour it over the rolls. Now there's two different ways you can do this. Normally how we do it is after the rolls have risen, I make sure that the heavy cream is not cold. You'll want to warm it just a little bit. It doesn't have to be hot because you don't want it to mess up the rise of the rolls. So before you put them in the oven, just drizzle that heavy cream on all over the top. Now that cream will bake in and it will cause this really gooey, sugary mixture to form on the bottom of the pan. So the bottom of the rolls will be really gooey and delicious. Now the second option for the heavy cream is to bake the rolls for about 12 minutes, 12 to 13 minutes, and then pour the heavy cream over and then finish baking. And that will just allow a softer texture all the way around, and they won't be quite as gooey on the bottom, but they'll be soft and gooey throughout. We've done it both ways. This is the way that we really like the best. You can choose which way you like the best. Preheat your oven to 375 degrees, and these will take about 17 to 19 minutes to bake. Just watch them closely. They'll get a little bit browned on top, and make sure they don't get overdone, but the exact time will depend on the pan that you use. While the rolls are baking, you can mix up a frosting. We love to put a cream cheese frosting on top of our cinnamon rolls with just a little bit of maple flavoring. Take 6 ounces of softened cream cheese, 1/3 cup of butter, and then use a hand mixer to cream those together until they're smooth. Next is 1/2 tablespoon of maple flavoring. You can use vanilla if you'd like. And then 2 cups of powdered sugar. I'm gonna put in 1/2 of the powdered sugar and mix that in. And then put in the rest of the powdered sugar. And then just set that aside until your cinnamon rolls are out of the oven. Here are the rolls. Spread on the cream cheese frosting. If you spread the frosting on the rolls while they're warm, it will melt in a little bit. If you don't want it to melt in, you can wait until the rolls are completely cooled to put it on. You can also just serve the frosting on the side so that if someone doesn't like all that sweet, they can put as much frosting on as they'd like. We actually like it when the frosting melts in just a little bit because it just adds to the gooiness of the rolls. My kids love the center rolls because they are the gooeyest. So it's always a little bit of a race to see who can get the gooeyest rolls. If only you guys could smell these cinnamon rolls. They smell amazing. Thanks for watching. I hope this tutorial helps you to have success with making these cinnamon rolls so that your family can enjoy them as much as we do. Be sure to like, subscribe, and check back next week for a new video. It is so good.